Hi everyone, welcome in. This is going to be part one of my guide to play War Thunder. Just a little bit of credentials from me first. I have just over 500 hours from two of my accounts. That's going to be Xbox and PC. We're just going to be going over tips, tricks, and the basics for casual air support. Now, that being said, we're going to get into our first tip. It's going to be covering angle and your drop zone. So this is going to come in kind of two parts, as I don't want to go over one of them and then leave the other one more unexplained. So the first one I'm going to try and tackle is your AOA, or your angle of approach. Your angle of approach is highly important due to if you come in too high, you can overshoot your bombs, leading to it doing basically nothing against the tank. Now that also being said, if you come in too low, depending on your speed, you can overshoot it as well, or you can undershoot it. And the problem with undershooting is if you undershoot your bombs, you're gonna hit that front plate on a lot of tanks, and that front plate is just gonna stop all of your bombs innards or your explosive powder or your shrapnel, the stuff that you're mainly trying to hit on the side armor or the back armor to do the most amount of damage. I think a true cash pilot's biggest issue is getting it so you have the perfect AOA on the tanks you come in at. Your AOA, it's very hard to master, but once you master it, it's pretty hard to mess up. What I like to do is I like to come at a 45-degree angle most of the time, or at least try to be within at least a 30 to 60-degree angle, because at that point I can kind of arrange my prop in a range, or the tip of my nose, because I'm not always flying a prop plane. You kind of align it with the tank, and then right the second you pull up, depending on what kind of angle you're coming in at, if you're coming in at a 60 degree, you right when you pull up, you drop them. Or if you're coming in at a 30 degree, you're gonna wait a little bit and then drop. Now that we've kind of gone over our drop zone and your AOA and how it affects the drop zone, I'm just gonna speak a little bit about left, rights, and just kind of what angle you're coming at. So I like to usually try and align myself straight dead on, but sometimes you do need to make minor adjustments, turning left or right, just to make sure you're lining up perfectly. And the problem with left and rights is a little goes a long way. It If you pull a little bit left, the bomb's going to go pretty far left depending on where you're dropping it at. If you're dropping it at 200 meters, it has that amount that you turned, but 200 meters to keep going in that direction. So you got to be very mindful of how much you're turning and how fast you're turning when you're dropping them. And that's gonna bring us into our second tip slash basic, and this one's gonna be a long one because it's where I'm focused mainly my dedication. So for this second tip, it's gonna be about awareness, and that's gonna come in a couple different ways. It's gonna be awareness of targets, it's gonna be awareness of AA, so enemies, or awareness of enemy fighter. Now, to be a good cash pilot, you're gonna need to kind of balance these three, and you're gonna always need to have them on the tip of your tongue, like right on the side of your brain. You're always gonna be thinking of them pretty much. So there's two types of awareness that is super super important, and that's AA and fighter pilots. Target awareness, it doesn't come so much in on these lower BRs, but it comes in a lot on bigger BRs because you're having to pick your targets. Because unless you're using American or German or Russians, you pretty much are very hard up for bomb sizes, cannon rounds, and just your main killers for tanks. So the first of the A that you're going to probably be using is like a Stuka or a Yak with a high caliber main cannon, and I'm just going to just label that as a cannon cache. The second one is going to be using bombs or rockets. I will preface this by saying I haven't used rockets very much, but I have a lot of experience in bombs as I'm a US and Russian main. So I do have a lot of experience when it comes to bombs and heavy caliber bombs at that. But I've also used a lot of low caliber bombs like 50 pounders, 50 kgs, 100 kgs, 100 pounders. So with cannon cache, your angle of approach and drop zone, of course they don't matter because you're not dropping anything and you don't really need to watch out for AOA. Personally, I try and angle myself very high up when I'm facing enemies, so I'm hitting their roof armor or like the top armor, because in lower BRs especially, the roof armor on a lot of tanks, or if they're not already open face, The roof armor is very, very squishy, so your cannon round pierces through it very easily. And so that's what I try and do mainly, and this is actually what I'm doing in the clip. You can see I'm using a SU-9, and it uses the same gun as some of the Yaks, but it's actually a strike aircraft, so it moves a bit slower, it has a bit of a slower turn rate, but it has 2 of the guns and 90 rounds, which makes it very OP. So as you can see, I'm coming in at a high angle of approach, so I'm hitting most of his top armor, and I try and focus fire his main cab, or his main turret. That way I am taking out his driver, his gunner, everything that can really damage my teammates. There's also a piece of awareness in this video that with the SU-9, it can work as a decent fighter. So that's also why I'm trying to fight off this fighter and do damage to it so it can't come back and shoot off my tail when I'm trying to return to base for ammo. This being said, I am trying to kind of run almost, because in this clip especially there's AA and it's lighting me up, and I take a hit here actually. So I'm kind of trying to regain speed, trying to regain the advantage over the tanks, I would say. But I'm also having awareness of this AA shooting at me, and also trying to pick my next target for when I come back in for another run. But while I'm doing this, I see, as you look below me, I see a very, very fast-moving tank that's getting on a very good position over my teammates. And this, as a cash pilot, you gotta remember, you're an air support unit. You are not just focusing on your own kills, you're focusing on the winning of your team. So I see that this guy's getting a very good spot over my team, so I actually try and turn around, even though I don't have good speed, I don't have a good position. I turn around to do my very best to help defend my team. And doing that, I will say, I died. But I got him still. And that was kind of lucky that I got him, because it was one of the last shots. But I will say, he took out my engine, he took out my wing. I'm on fire. This is game over for me. There's no coming back from this. So I hit the floor, unfortunately, but I saved a lot of team members doing that. I also got myself another kill, and now I'm just back to the ground. So it comes with a lot of awareness, and that's the main thing about it, is you need to be aware of your fighter pilots, your AA, and your targets. With the cannon CAS, you can be a little bit less picky, but with the one that I just took out, the LA7, I have to be very picky because I only have 20 mils. They're not very good for piercing armor. Open tops, yeah, I can decimate them, but heavily armored, I have no chance of penetrating. And with that, the cannon CAS portion of this video is gonna come to an end, more or less, because I would like to speak on bombs and rockets now. Depending on what type of bomb you're using, how big its explosive mass is, or just how big it is in general, you have to be quite a bit more picky than I am, because certain bombs that you will see in your bomb description on how much armor they can pierce. But a lot of the time, the smaller bombs you get put with in the start of the tiers, like 3.0, 4.0, a lot of those bombs won't actually one-shot heavy tanks, so you need to be a little bit more picky with what you can get. With cannon CAS, they're a little bit more pampered because they can take out heavy tanks, even if, like 37 mils and up, you can take out heavy tanks, no problem. But with bombs, you need to be more picky. So the AOA and the drop zone are very important when it comes to bombs, especially if you're trying to hit an armored target versus an open face. But with the bombs, it's more or less easier to kill open face or lightly armored. So I would say the awareness of targeting is much more important than it is with cannon CAS. You need to be a lot more aware of what type of tanks you're going for, where you're dropping them, what they're looking at, just more or less that. Because if they're moving and you have a longer bomb fuse, sadly you aren't going to kill them 9 times out of 10. But to stay alive most times as a bomber, you need to be picking targets that are far away from AA, because AA can absolutely decimate you, because you do kind of need to go in a straight line when you're using a bomber, because if you don't go in that straight line, it's much harder to hit your bomb. but now that we've kind of browsed over target awareness and I feel like we haven't gone over our two main enemies as cash: anti-air and enemy aircraft, mainly fighters. So we need to be aware of both of these at all times, and we need to. It's hard because you need to almost simultaneously be aware of one while also being aware of the other, and you need to be kind of switching around your looks, making sure you're keeping an eye on AA, making sure you're keeping an eye on the fighter. So the first two ways that we can kind of get rid of these awarenesses and kind of get rid of these targets and get rid of these threats to us mainly is A. So with a dogfighter, you can attempt to get a reversal and get your guns on target, because your guns will absolutely decimate them. If you're in a cannon fighter or even some strike aircraft, they have really good gunfire and really good firepower. You just need to get that hit off. Or B, you can lead them to a friendly fighter or a friendly AA. With enemy anti-air, I try to stay over a kilometer, or for you Americans, 0.6, 0.7 miles away to make it more difficult for them to hit you, because a lot of these lower tier AA, they have very slow firing cannons, slow firing guns. So the farther you are away, the harder it is to hit you. So it's very imperative that you stay decently far away from them. It makes it much harder for them to kill you. And that brings us on to tip number 3, or basic number 3. And that is going to be defensive flying. This is one of the best tricks for a good cache pilot. You need to be unpredictable and random in our flight paths, our altitudes, and our angle of approaches. So our AOA it's hard because you need to stick into a consistent AOA so you know where to drop, but you can't be doing it time and time and time again, because AA is going to learn your patterns and they're going to shoot you down. Same thing with fighters. They're going to learn your run and then shoot you down before you ever actually get to A, drop your bombs, or B, shoot your cannons. It just makes you an easier target for them, and that's what we're trying not to do. We're trying to make it their lives as hard as possible, while also getting their tanks off the ground for our friendlies. So my trick for defensive flying is, if a fighter does get behind us, shake as much as possible. It's going to be pressing your E button, your Q button, your WASD, whatever you can. Just move around as much as possible. Yes, it's going to bleed off airspeed, so keep an eye on that airspeed. And I'm not talking your normal airspeed, I'm talking initial airspeed. Because your AIS, that's your initial airspeed, that's before your engine power. It's going to be important, because if you're not watching that, you're going to stall out and you're going to be slow, and it's going to be easy to shoot you down. But if you're watching that while you moving around a bunch and using your defensive flying techniques, it's going to be good. You're not going to be able to go down very easily. And a lot of the time with your strike planes and bombers, you also have back gunners that can take out airplanes as they're trying to kill you, which is very, very helpful, because a lot of those gunners, they're pretty good shots. They can kill the pilots or kill the engines, or at least damage them enough that they have to turn off or they're going to die. Just basically what I'm saying is, if we don't know good defensive flying techniques, or we don't know how to defensively fly, you're going to be hitting the floor in no time. And it's definitely just one of the key important factors to a good cache pilot. My tip for fighters is, a lot of the time they don't know proper maneuvers, so their goal is just to try and get guns on you, no problem. So dive, use your altitude against them. A lot of earlier planes, they weren't made to sustain high speeds and still make turns like American planes or Russian planes. So a lot of the time, you can get them compressed. So you dip down, and what compression basically is if you dip down and you get going fast enough, their wings are going to compress into a way that they can't turn sharply. So basically, they're just going to go straight into the ground. Now, I know in the background right now, we're having some 5.3 Russia, 5.7 Russia. But that is, you've seen the first match, of course, in the desert. So it's basically, you've seen how I play, you've seen how it goes. I've already showed you cannon cache, so I'm going to throw us in a 8.7 American. I'm going to be using the Saber with 2,000-pound bombs just to try and show you guys bombers, my train of thought while I'm bombing, and what I'm doing. And basically just try and show you guys how I personally use bombs in a cache aspect. So, like I said, we're in the Saber with 2,000-pound bombs. So I'm going at a very high altitude in this clip. We're going to be dive bombing on a couple targets that I've seen personally that are giving my team a little bit of trouble. I dropped both bombs all at once because two never hurts. One may not finish the job, and the other one will definitely finish the job. It was a lightly armored target, so I probably could have just dropped one, but who cares? Two is safer than one. So as you can see, as I dropped it, I checked my bomb tracker just to see how good I aligned my bombs on target, and I was pretty on target for that one. He was moving, I will say that, so I was a little bit off. Although if he was sitting in the same spot he was, I would have hit him dead on the nose. So I'm going to return to base to repair, refuel, rearm. Now, here I am. I'm just taking off the runway again, getting ready to come back in the air and do another bombing run. So for this run, we are trying to keep an eye just on our airspeed, how fast we're going, our altitude. We're trying to gain at least 800 to 900 meters of altitude is usually where I like to stay. You can go higher, you can go lower, it's up to you honestly and how your playstyle is. Mine is come in from a high altitude, that way I have a much harder time missing. So I come in from a very high altitude, so I have less spots where I can miss, overshoot or undershoot, whether that being whichever. As I'm here, I'm just going through, trying to see who's all died where, if somebody just said anything that I missed. I am also keeping an eye on the battlefield as well as my kill feed, trying to make sure, see who we're killing, where we're killing them, where the center of mass of the enemies are. So right here, somebody pings somebody for me, just off the right side of C. So I pull down and I start focusing so I can aim for them. But as I'm coming in, I'm noticing where the target's actually saying he is, it isn't there. So I drop them right then and there, and I drop him basically dead on. And he gets absolutely fried. So that is perfect for me. I came in high, I dropped low. Like I said, aligned it with my nose and then dropped them right as I pulled up, which basically hit it dead on the nose. And I honestly, the Saber is one of my favorite things to use bombs with because it's fast, it's agile, and it's really, really easy to aim. That's honestly gonna be pretty well, I think, the last kill I got with this plane. I'm gonna keep it rolling just because I think it's funny how I died. I preach all this stuff like I'm a really good pilot. I never mess ups, but I'm just gonna show you here that I do mess up, even with my 500 hours. I always mess up every once in a while, and I'm human, so I make mistakes sometimes. But with that, I'm gonna do my little turny turn to lose airspeed, and I did it a bit too much, and straight into the tree. Looks like I didn't pay my premium for the day. But anyways, thank you guys for watching. This has been part 1 to my guide for War Thunder. Yeah, thank you for stopping by. This was Crow's Guide to Cache. I hope you guys enjoy. I hope you guys learned something. I appreciate you guys for all of spending this 20 minutes or so with me. And I hope to see you guys in the next one. Thank you for watching. Bye now.